anniversary, and then maybe
There it is. Hello, everybody. It is Thursday. We're already in May. When did that happen? I have no idea when that happened. Welcome to Thursday. Welcome to another session episode of Let's Talk Power Live. You may have noticed a different time and change. I'm a little bit backed up. Things get hectic. You know how life gets going. But I'm excited to be here for another episode as we talk about something we haven't talked about. Before we get started, I want to take care of some what we call housekeeping things. Number one, if you have not subscribed, I'm going to invite you to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. We are celebrating 2 years of Let's Talk Power Live, and our goal is to get to 200 subscribers by our anniversary. So please go ahead, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and then I'm going to ask you to also invite 2 people, share this show with 2 people, and invite them to like and subscribe as well. That is our goal, to get to 200. We know that there are lots of podcasts and shows out there, and it's kind of hard to break through some of that noise. But here's what I know. Power in education is a real thing. And instructional power is even more real. And while there are conversations about power going on in the world around us, because I hear the word power in so many different ways, I also know that there are very few places where there is an explicit conversation about power in education. We know that there are power differentials everywhere. We understand that. But what we do here at what we do here at Let's Talk Power Live, I'm getting my book title and the show title conflated. But what we do here at Let's Talk Power Live is we bring conversations about power and education to the forefront so we can have an explicit discussion about it. All of this is grounded in my book, Understanding Your Instructional Power, Curriculum and Language Decisions to Support Each Student. Over the last 2 years, we've had wonderful guests who have really helped us have this conversation. And so we're inviting you to continue to join us. To our subscribers out there, thank you for subscribing. We are just about halfway to our goal. So going to keep asking folks to like, subscribe, and share. So one word, I'm going to ask you if tonight's conversation is going to be a little bit different. We're going to be talking about artificial intelligence, but not in the way that we're discussing how to use AI. There are tons of conversations out there. You can hit AI in any search engine and you'll get a plethora of opportunities to learn about how to become an expert in AI. You can get certified, you can take any number of courses, all of the things. What we're talking about tonight is something different. We're going to talk about conversations in AI that are not actually being held. So if this conversation is something that you are excited about, leave me a comment in the comment section. Say ready. Leave me a comment saying, you know what, I'm ready for tonight's conversation so that we can begin talking about this whole situation with AI. The conversation that we're going to have tonight about AI is really about some of the power dynamics surrounding AI. And that's the conversation that we don't traditionally have. And that's the conversation, because we talk about power in real ways. That is the conversation I wanted to have with everybody tonight. So go ahead, leave me a comment and say, you know what? I'm ready for tonight's conversation. But before we do that, you know what I have to give you? I have to give you our conversation and our definition of power. I give it to you every single week. I'm going to give it to you right now. So here is our definition of power in education. Here it is. Education is the instrument of democratic designs, and it is no less the instrument of power. The control of information, the shaping of understanding, and the influence of judgment are critical elements common to democratic design, power theory, and educational philosophy. That is what the capital P, power in education, is. And if power in education weren't real, here's what would not have happened. We would not have experienced the largest reduction of available reading materials, i.e., books on shelves, than we have since the McCarthy era. Right back in the 1950s, McCarthy, in his McCarthyism, was having books removed. We have experienced the largest reduction, the largest removal in books since that time period. That's how power works in education. Power in education also works when we have what we have seen is a curtailment of a sort of, what do we call that? It's a chilling effect of curriculum. When curriculum gets so narrow because the sensibilities of a few are elevated over the need for the many to learn critical information about our nation's history and what this nation is and has become. And when we have this chilling effect, we're seeing power at work. We see power at work in education when the Department of Education is making wholesale changes around the way monies and funding is spent, when they begin to move the dollars from the Department of Education and disseminate them across the government for lots of reasons. That's what power in education is all about. But now I want to share with you what I always share with you is what instructional power is about. So let's take a look at that. Instructional power can be understood as an educator's use of their state, district, and building ascribed job-related authority to afford or constrain a student's access to learning. What does that mean? That means the actions that an educator takes, either those actions afford and move access forward, or those actions constrain and hold access back. When I talk about an educator, I mean someone at the state level, district level, building level, classroom level. Because at every one of those levels, a person is pulling a lever that's going to make a decision that's going to impact a child. And that's why I call them all educators. So let's get a hold of tonight's conversation and what I really want us to lean into. I want you to go back. I want you to think about, excuse me, I have a sneeze. I want you to think about the last time something new in education came about and what was the immediate response. For me, and I say this a lot, I'm a woman of a certain age. I remember when laptops and computers, believe it or not, when they began to take full effect in our buildings and districts across the state and across the country. I noticed something interesting back then. The knee-jerk response to the computer use, the widespread computer use in classrooms and buildings was negative. It was met with skepticism and it was met with resistance. And that was a legitimate concern. And then once we got to understand the use and the benefits of having laptops and computers and other forms of technology in schools, we began to see different ways and different understandings of how they could be beneficial. But I want to run down to, I'm looking for my papers because I want to make sure I say it the right way. I want to share with you some historical background around what happens oftentimes when there are new innovations brought to school. Believe it or not, the chalkboard was seen as a threat to educators. And here's what they thought. I'm reading from history. It says, in one-room schoolhouses, It disrupted a model built around individual slates and small group teaching. So if you think about a one room schoolhouse, they had each child would have an individual chalkboard, basically, they had a little chalk slate, and then they would be able to walk around the classroom, and the teacher could go to the each individual group, and they could work. And so having a chalkboard at the front of the room disrupted that pattern. That was something that was interesting. But then they began to understand the use and benefit of the chalkboard and the small group slates. But here's another one: calculators. Remember when calculators were seen as an affront? Interestingly enough, here's what's said. In the 1970s and 80s, calculators were feared because they thought students would lose arithmetic and conceptual reasoning. Were they wrong? I don't know if they were wrong. I do know that there was deep concern about calculators. And then we got to a point where calculators were used with a more judicious lens. And then, of course, with the internet, and then with Wikipedia, and then some student-centered shifts also became something that educators, and this was at the classroom level, educators began to get skeptical about. And that is something that we're seeing right now when we're talking about AI. And again, I am not having a conversation about how to use AI. I am using AI in lots of different ways, but this is not that conversation. Tonight's conversation that I want to have with all of us is a conversation about the power dynamics that are surrounding the use of AI. So I want to raise very clearly some legitimate concerns. Let's get the legitimate concerns out of the way and how we can talk about the legitimate concerns, because there are legitimate concerns. And so here we go. Some of the legitimate concerns that we have around AI is one about safety. The sort of open use of this thing that we're not quite sure what it is and what it's doing. So there's a safety element to that. But on top of just AI, the artificial intelligence, there are some other real serious concerns around technology writ large in buildings, right? How about cell phones? If cell phones are a situation in your building, please put me a comment and say, you know what, cell phones. The cell phones are a real legitimate concern. There are concerns about the attention. There are concerns about whether or not students are engaging in conversations with people outside of the building, the management of cell phones. So if cell phones are a challenge in your learning environment, put in the comments cell phones and let me know what's going on with those cell phones in your area. The other thing that's really shaping this is this idea and the concern around distractions. Students are being distracted by all of the quote unquote noise in the world, right? AI noise, cell phone noise. You know, they're having conversations over the weekends, and those weekend conversations are seeping into buildings. But the power dynamic that I want to lean into tonight is I want to lean in to the power dynamic around authority. I want to lean into this power dynamic about who gets to decide the learning, who gets to decide the production, who gets to decide the control and the dissemination of information. That is the power dynamic conversation we are not having. Yes, we can talk about loss of intention. We can also talk about whether or not the information that kids are getting from an AI tool is trustworthy. But the dynamic that's underway right now is around who really is controlling the flow, who is really going to make sure that what is there is legitimate. The other concern, too, is around, and I just mentioned this word, the other concern is trust. Trust is important here because Number one, there's a possibility that the use of artificial intelligence when it comes to young people using it to create and produce work, it's creating a trust breakdown between teachers and students because teachers are wondering whether what a student is producing is actually their own work or whether or not they are using AI in place of their own work. There was a study out recently by the Brookings Institute. They study all kinds of issues around the world, and they did a study around the use of AI in education. And then 74 million, they do a lot of education reporting. They came out with a sort of big takeaway. They wanted to sort of give readers who don't have time to go into the Brookings study a kind of 4-piece takeaway. I want to share those takeaways with you right now. And here are the 4 takeaways that the 74 million group shared around the Brookings report. Their chief, I want to call it their chief sort of concerns, their chief findings when they did their report on AI in education and what the impact of those was going to be. And here's what they said. Their first one was AI can undermine foundational development. Their premise is the use of AI can begin to break down a student's ability to engage in cognitive thinking. If they begin to rely on a generative AI tool very early on, it will strip away their brain's ability to think on its own. That's a concern, but that's also a power concern. So we're going to talk about that in a few moments. Their next takeaway was AI can hinder social emotional growth. If a child is stuck with a screen in front of their face, the belief is it will limit their ability to build human relationships. It'll stunt that human relationship growth. Is it legitimate? You know what? I think it is legitimate. But, that's not just the issue, though. We have to be able to look at the tool beyond it just being a tool. And what we're seeing right now is a big concern around the social, emotional aspects of AI in classrooms. This conversation here at Let's Talk Power Live is about the power dynamics around instruction. So let's keep going on these takeaways. The next takeaway is, and I already mentioned this one, AI can erode trust between teachers and students. And that trust we can see with teachers questioning whether or not the materials, the projects, the essays, whatever students are producing, teachers are now feeling this threat or this need, this trepidation around whether what their students are producing is actually authentically theirs. That's the third big takeaway. And then the last takeaway that they share was schools shift from transactional work to human-centered design. That's something that they raise. They want to ask and challenge the field, as it were, to really begin to shift from this transaction of this, in, out, to building back up the human condition. And that's really important. One of the areas I want to talk about, and we're going to get into this right now, is centering the fact that when an educator, and now I'm talking about the educator in the classroom, when an educator in the classroom is feeling a sense of the change in their position and their identity as the leader in the classroom, it signals in the brain a threat level. And that threat level comes out through a reduction in trust. That threat level is going to evidence itself through increased questioning of a student. That's the power dynamic that I'm talking about. So the educator, when they don't know what this artificial intelligence is doing, it is making them believe that their sense of self as the leader is going to be erased, that somehow the use of artificial intelligence is going to replace the educator in the room. Will that happen? I do not know. But what I do know is that the threat level being faced and felt right now is triggering something that we really do need to have this conversation about. And if this conversation is, again, something that you're seeing, I want you to put in the comments, leave me comments. And I'm trying to get your comments. You can tell there's a theme here, right? Trying to get you to let me know what you're thinking. Are you seeing this idea of power in your buildings that's really creating something that educators are beginning to feel that they're going to be left out, that they might be left behind? And so as we have a deeper conversation, if you follow me for any length of time, you know that I have a power ideology. And my power ideology talks about position. It talks about ownership. It talks about work. It talks about the environment. And it talks about relationships. And I want to bring that power ideology up for us to discuss right now. So let's take a look at the power ideology relative to the use of AI in classrooms and the power dynamic shift that we're seeing. So number one, AI is not just exposing our technology infrastructure. It is actually exposing existing power ideologies. Number one, it's exposing the position. Who controls knowledge? Right now, we are used to the adults controlling the knowledge, the flow of knowledge, what kids learn, how much they learn, and when they learn it. The use of artificial intelligence is expanding that. The information is at the fingertips of a student immediately. They can ask a great question, or not even a great question, any question. And right then, they can get information about something that they're interested in. So as an educator, you might be teaching about the planets. But if a child is disinterested in planets and has a different idea in their head, they can, if AI is available in the school at the moment, they can type in anything and go off on a learning journey completely disconnected from what's being taught by the adult. Or if they are learning something from the adult and they want to go further than the adult is at the moment in the building, they can type something into an AI tool and get even more information. So this positionality, who controls the information and the knowledge right now, is really something of a power identity we have to talk about. Is this something that we need to question and challenge? Your position as the instructional leader in that building. Is it truly under threat, or is there something else to consider? And by the way, if you have not liked or subscribed to the show, please do so. These conversations are really important, and we know how algorithms work. We know that to keep this show in the forefront of people's minds, we need people to like, subscribe, and share. Now, let's talk about this idea of ownership. When it comes to this idea of pushing and challenging and exposing power ideologies, the AI now is also asking us to consider who actually owns the learning. It can go beyond the educator in the building, in the district, in the parent, in the home, right? And then what about the work? What kind of work? Who does the thinking here? And the thinking traditionally is coming out of predetermined curricula, right? Third-party curricula, and there are still teachers who develop their own curricula. But artificial intelligence now is opening a window, and it is allowing young people to think critically. A lot of us, I'm saying us because I consider myself a teacher, I don't believe this necessarily, but it really is a common belief that AI is going to reduce critical thinking. I'm of a different ilk. I believe as educators who are really in tune to our students and who are really in tune to the need to learn, we can be great partners with this tool and help our students be even better critical thinkers. And then what about the environment? This is a big concern, right? The conditions that shape learning. What are those conditions that shape learning? And then lastly, the relationship. What happens to human connection? That is a big concern regarding the use of this new tool that we call artificial intelligence. And here's what I know to be true. We've had artificial intelligence for centuries, decades. Think about your car, think about the appliances you have in your home. That's all run by an artificial intelligence model. The challenge and difference now is that humans, we have our own one-to-one relationship with an artificially intelligent thing. And that's scary. So right now it's scary. It's really something to consider. And we're thinking about what it means to actually have, not even have, but use artificial intelligence in a learning environment. And we know that schools, the schooling process is a controlled environment. And as much as we say it is about the students, the mechanisms in school are adult centered. And what this use of artificial intelligence does, it actually can create student centered learning, the actual student centered learning. But the structures of school are not designed to deal with it. But I want to make sure that we are clear about what we can do regarding this. And every week I give us power moves, because right now, this is not just about the AI as a tool. This is about the artificial intelligence and the exposure points to the power dynamics of access, of knowledge. So I want to share 3 power moves like I do every week. And I want us to think critically about these power moves. So let's go to power move number 1. The first thing I want you to do as a leader in a building, really going to ask you to name the threat that your teachers are feeling. Name it explicitly and name it honestly. Okay? I mean, you have to name it because it's not going away. It's a real live thing. What does that mean? It means acknowledging educator concerns without dismissing them. Really pay attention to that and really get into how are they feeling? What is the language that they need to have regarding their feelings? And we want to make sure that as we talk about this, that we are really leaning into the ways in which our traditional position as the instructional leader in a classroom, we want to make sure that we are very cognizant that what educators are feeling right now is something very, very real. And right now, they might be feeling that their expertise is being threatened. They might also be feeling that their instructional identity is being challenged. And then their authority is under threat. They might be feeling all of those. So I want you to name that and then acknowledge it, right? Name the legitimate tensions. What is the tension here? And then create spaces for discussion, not just jumping in to policies. We love a good policy, but before we get there, let's have some space for discussion. And what does that look like? It makes the educator feel seen instead of silenced. Your thoughtful leadership conversations will be not reactive, right? You will build your relationships when you really lean into this conversation. Let's talk about power move number 2. Power move number 2, distinguish between protecting actual learning and protecting control. Not all resistance is wrong, and we know that. Sometimes you really do need to resist. You need some guardrails, and that's important, especially from a safety perspective. But the question is, when are you crossing the line and leaning into really protecting your control, but you don't want to say it? So what does that look like? Examine the purpose of the policies. What's behind that? Ask what the policy is actually protecting and avoid reactionary tightening without instructional vision. We got to have vision. And then what does that mean? It means that the leaders are going to create clearer, more coherent responses that protect learning without unnecessarily constraining innovation and agency. We don't want to constrain the agency. And then power move number 3, reimagine instructional power responsibly. What does that mean? That means go back to that POWER. Is your position legitimately under threat? It may not be. Think through ways of how to incorporate the use of AI responsibly so that we're not just protecting our adult sensibilities. What does that look like? Shift from gatekeeping information to guiding discernment. Teach students how to evaluate, question, and think critically alongside that tool. And then use AI to support learning without replacing human relationships and instructional judgment. What does that look like? What's the impact of that? Schools move from reactive fear toward thoughtful, future-focused leadership that keeps learning and human connection centered. That is what we're getting at. This is not about sort of moving away from the human contact. Human contact is always going to be important. It's always going to matter. And so when we pull all this together, I want us to understand this. This isn't only about AI. It's about who's responsible for learning, who gets to control attention, who gets to control production, and who gets to control learning inside school. And every one of these is a leadership decision. It really does matter as we think critically about the use of AI. And I've heard me say this, when you're thinking about, the end of the year is upon you. It's either coming tomorrow or coming next week, which is essentially tomorrow. As you begin as a leader to think through what your summer professional learning and development is going to look like, this is the kind of work that we help leaders build in their systems and in their buildings. And I'm going to invite you to go ahead and let us know how we can support you as you begin to plan for your summer learning so that next year's school, you are not feeling the same trepidation about the use of AI. Because here's the thing, it's not going anywhere. It's going to be here. So let's make sure that the conversation that we had tonight about power and AI, about access, who does have access to it? Who are the kids that you believe are responsible enough to quote unquote handle it versus the students who you say, you know what, I don't think that they can do it, so I'm going to make sure that they don't have it. It's here to stay. Every student needs to understand what it is, how to use it, and we cannot protect adult sensibilities to the degree that we shut down innovation and creativity. So that's the conversation that we needed to have, and I'm glad that we had it tonight. So thank you for joining me this week for Let's Talk Power Live. But next week, I get to have Dr. Chris Childs from Open Up Resources. He's the Chief Academic Officer of Open Up Resources, and he's the author of Chris Teaches Math. He will be joining us next week for our session of Let's Talk Power Live, and I am excited to have him join us. So again, thank you for joining. Make sure that you please like, subscribe, and share the channel. Oh yes, the banner. I'm taking this conversation about middle school to another level. We are dropping a brand new series, a 3-article series on the messy middle, and we're going to lean into development-centered leadership. So look for that link, and we're going to also be doing something new as well. So stay tuned. Make sure you hit that like, subscribe button. Let us know what you're thinking. Share the channel with others, and we will see you next week for another session of Let's Talk Power Live.